years ago, on the 6th of June 1944, the largest amphibious landings in recorded history took place. Known as Operation Overlord or D-Day, the fate of the world hung in the balance. Men representing the USA, Canadian, British and Allied forces stormed 5 beaches in Normandy for the purpose of cracking through Hitler's Atlantic Wall, moving on to Paris and then Berlin, creating a turning point in World War II. We will be visiting these 5 beaches and other locations in Normandy to explore this historic moment 80 years on.
On the evening of the 5th of June 1944, the evening before D-Day, Major Howard and 180 men from the British 6th Airborne Division landed here via glider at Pegasus Bridge. Securing sites like this was crucial to the success of D-Day, with the beaches just a few miles that way. The apparent German counterattack that the British forces expected, bridges like this had to be secured to stop that. The bridge was originally named Benneville Bridge, but after the war it was renamed Pegasus Bridge. In 1994, the original bridge was replaced with this modern version. You can still see the original bridge in the Pegasus Bridge Memorial, which is over there.
Now that Pegasus Bridge is secured, the landings can begin. On this spot 80 years ago, this beach, codenamed Sword, looked very different. Sword Beach was one of the code names for one of the 5 landing areas during the assault phase of Operation Overlord. The goal for men on this beach was to eventually break through and take back the city of Caen. At around 7:30, there was a heavy naval bombardment and elements of the British 3rd Infantry Division hit this beach with force. The first to land on this beach were the amphibious DD tanks, elements of the 8th Infantry Brigade and some of the Royal Engineers. Resistance on this beach was initially strong. However, by around 9:30, the British had secured the immediate area and the Royal Engineers had cleared 7 of the 8 exits, allowing the inland advance to begin. British losses on the first day alone at Sword amounted to 683 men, but over 30,000 men made it ashore.
Taking Juno Beach was the responsibility of the 1st Canadian Army. They had to cut the Caen-Bayeux Road and join up the 2 surrounding beaches, Sword and Gold. At 7:25 a.m, the ships off the coast sent a barrage of artillery to the German defences, but due to a lack of aerial visibility, it was largely unsuccessful. At 7:55 a.m, the infantry attack began, and in the first wave, losses were immediate, and due to obstacles, engineers were needed. The Canadian troops struggled for a few hours, but they secured the beach by 11:40 a.m, with some of them making it as far as 3 kilometres inland. Juno is often overlooked when we look at the 5 D-Day beaches, but it actually had the highest casualty rate of 1 in 18.
For the men of the 50th Infantry Division landing here on Gold Beach, their objectives were complex and important. Firstly, they needed to secure the beach before moving to Omaha Beach to meet up with the US troops, moving on to Arromanches and Bayeux, and then on to Juno, where the Canadians would help them with Bayeux. The harbour that you can see behind us is the remains of one of 2 mulberry harbours that were used on Gold Beach and Omaha Beach. Unfortunately, the one at Omaha Beach was destroyed in a storm, but this one behind us was used for the entirety of the Normandy campaign. First designed in 1942, these harbours were designed in secret, made from old boats and sunk in position to move men, materiel and cargo onto the beaches. The British Army suffered over 1,000 casualties on Gold Beach, with over 300 dead. Landing on Gold Beach, which is just half a mile behind me that way, Stanley Hollis, Sergeant Major with the Green Howards, won the only Victoria Cross on D-Day. Stanley and his men came here to this pillbox here, and single-handedly with his Sten submachine gun and a grenade, he killed and captured over 30 German soldiers.
Utah Beach was attacked by the 4th US Infantry Division. In the early hours before the landings, the 82nd Airborne and the 101st Airborne troops secured key locations to ensure success of landing at Utah Beach. Utah Beach was a late addition in Operation Overlord. Originally, it wasn't going to be included, but General Eisenhower, who was the supreme commander of the Allied forces, decided that he wanted to get in early and try and secure the port of Cherbourg. The landings went wrong from the beginning. The problem was, 3 of the 4 landing crafts were destroyed by mines, and then the 4th landing craft got lost, and it had to be led in by communication by bullhorn. Eventually, it did find its way, but it landed 2,000 yards to the east of where it was meant to originally land. Assistant Division Commander, Brigadier General Theodore Roosevelt Jr., quickly realised the error, and he uttered his famous words, "We'll start the war here." He ordered his men to advance, and within 3 hours, exits 1, 2, and 3 of the beach were secured, and they were on their way by 12 p.m. to meeting up with the 101st Airborne Division. For a landing that started with such terrible confusion, the Utah landings were actually relatively successful. Because of the error of the landing craft landing 2,000 yards away, they were actually in a less defended part of the beach, which meant that over 20,000 men and 1,700 vehicles were able to land on Utah Beach. Due to the success of the Allied Airborne mission, the Germans were unable to attack the seaborne missions as the Allied Airborne mission blocked the roads on the way to the beaches. But by later in the day, the Germans were in a position to counterattack. By the end of D-Day, some of the objectives were achieved. All 4 exits were secured by the 101st Airborne Division, and La Baquette was in American hands. But 2 of the bridges were still in German enemy control, and they had made no contact with the 82nd Division.
In the early hours of the morning of the 6th of June 1944, men from the 101st and 82nd Airborne Divisions dropped here in the Cottontan Peninsula to take key beach causeways and towns in the area. Because of technical issues and flak fire, many of the men missed their drop zones and had to fight their way through the region in makeshift groups. Lieutenant Richard Winters of the 101st Airborne Division, the de facto commander of Easy Company in the 2nd Battalion, was given the task of destroying 4 German artillery pieces here at Brécourt Manor. With the enemy number still unknown, Winters divided his men into 2 groups, attacking the German artillery position with 2 machine gun squads covering their advance. Winters moved directly onto the first gun, with Lieutenant Buck Compton and 2 other men moving to the enemy machine gun, allowing him to provide covering fire for the rest of Easy Company moving through the trenches, destroying the 4 105mm guns with TNT. The attack on Brécourt Manor is still taught in military schools in the US today and is considered a near-perfect execution of small team tactics and great leadership. Lieutenant Winters was awarded the Distinguished Service Medal, along with most of his men receiving the Bronze or Silver Star for their actions at Brécourt Manor. For the men of the battle-hardened 1st and 29th Infantry Divisions, a quick victory on the beach was needed, but that was not to be. Unfortunately, the air and naval bombardment planned to weaken the coastal defences completely missed Omaha Beach, so the US troops landing at Omaha were completely exposed to German machine gun fire and mortar fire. Due to poor conditions at sea, many of the landing crafts from the initial waves were dropping their ramps hundreds of yards offshore, leaving men exposed to not only the German fire but also to the sea. During the landings, men from the 2nd and 5th US Army Rangers landed at Pointe du Hoc, behind me, scaled the cliffs and took the important artillery position that was able to fire on Omaha and Utah Beach. The bravery of these Rangers is immortalised in their motto, "Rangers lead the way." The initial losses were immense. Many of the initial landing craft scattered their men all across the beach. Only 2 of the 29 designated tanks for Omaha made it ashore, making the job of the infantry even harder. As reserve waves hit the beach, losses mounted as the beach was still not secured. After several hours of hard fighting, the men landing at Omaha had finally secured the beach. They would eventually move on to link up with men landing at Utah and Gold Beach, but on the first day alone, over 700 men from the US 1st and 29th Infantry Divisions had been killed, with a further 2,000 injured or missing.
Although the successes of D-Day weren't immediately known, 80 years later we know that despite the setbacks, secrecy and losses to life, the 130,000 men that landed in Normandy in June of 1944 set off the chain reaction that put an end to the deadliest conflict in human history. We will remember them.